Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this edition of Defense News Weekly, we're here at the Air Force Association's Airspace and Cyber Conference, learning more about the future of the Air Force, including some big budget decisions and changes to the bomber fleet. With in-depth interviews, up-close video, and leading analysis, this is Defense News Weekly. Welcome to this week's edition of Defense News Weekly. I'm Jeff Martin here at the AFA Airspace and Cyber Conference in National Harbor, Maryland. It's been a great week here at the show, as there's a lot going on with the Air Force. On this episode, we'll hear from Chief of Staff General David Goldfein, as well as some of the industry about changes to some of the Air Force's bombers. But before we hear that, let's go look at some headlines from this show. Up first is that the Air Force is going to make some bold and controversial budget decisions. At least that's what Acting Secretary Matt Donovan is calling it in the upcoming FY 2021 budget. This comes as the Air Force is looking to make some major changes to reorient the force for a future conflict. While very few details about that review have been released, it could involve retiring entire aircraft fleets, changing some future acquisitions, as well as some force structure changes. But in order to find out what any of those changes are, we're likely going to have to wait until the 2021 budget release, which comes early next year. And things haven't exactly been easy for the Air Force's B-1 bombers, with multiple groundings and a retirement looming. But yesterday here at the show, the head of Air Force Global Strike Command, General Timothy Ray, told the audience that the B-1's capabilities could expand at the same time as it won't be flying close air support in Southwest Asia. Ray says that some of the structural issues of the aircraft were less than previously thought, and that the U.S. Air Force could add more capacity within the aircraft by shifting some bulkheads in the plane's bomb bay. That would make it much more capable for a future fight. And Boeing says they're still going to finish their development work on a next-generation ICBM, known as the Ground Based Strategic Deterrent, or GBSD, despite saying in July that they wouldn't bid over concerns with the program. Boeing's GBSD program head, Frank McCall, told reporters that they believe the Air Force or Congress should make competitor Northrop Grumman team up with them, and that they also aren't ruling out a protest to the GAO if that doesn't happen. But this week, Northrop Grumman announced a team for their program and did not include Boeing on it. And the Pentagon's Inspector General, or DoDIG, is investigating the Air Force's boom design and development process for the much maligned KC-46 tanker. Well, the announcement did not specify an exact reason for the review. It comes as that boom is having to be redesigned because it was too stiff to refuel certain aircraft like the A-10. That work is expected to be done by 2021. This also comes as Air Mobility Command Leader General Marianne Miller has made very clear to reporters that she is not pleased with Boeing's work fixing problems with those tankers. And it's safe to say that when you see one of Air Force Special Operations Command's CV-22 Ospreys in the air, it's a pretty unique sight. But keeping them up there can sometimes be a challenge. So that was a question posed to the head of that organization. Take a look.
The CV-22 readiness challenges are pretty common across both the Air Force and the Marine Corps. And so we've now got enough experience under our belt operating the CV-22 that we kind of understand where the readiness drivers reside in terms of the parts and supply systems and that kind of thing. Our experience with the V-22 is when it's deployed and is sustained by a responsive supply system, we generate a lot of flight hours on the V-22. So we don't really operationally see a lot of impacts there. I mean, when the airplanes fly, they fly pretty well, and we don't have any concerns with that. But what we are seeing is some components that are failing at a higher than expected rate and are driving additional maintenance workload and putting pressure on our supply system. So we're working with the Navy, who has the lead for the Joint Program Office, the Air Force Logistics Enterprise, as well as the Marine Corps as the other operators of the platform to identify those particular parts that are driving sustainment issues for us and working together to address those components that need to be re-engineered, or we need a more robust supply system for them. Well, I think, like the rest of the department, I mean, we would love to get to MC-80 as a goal, but we recognize that's just a number, and really what it's about is generating flight hours for our air crews.
One big thing we're seeing here this week all over and around us is the competition to re-engine the Air Force's B-52 bombers. There are 3 competitors putting up 4 different engines that could do the job. So I decided to pay all of them a visit and find out what they have to offer. Here's my report. So it's safe to say the B-52 is an old aircraft, and with that comes old engines that now need to be replaced, according to the Air Force. So there's a lot of competitors out here at AFA 2019 to kind of figure out who's going to be the person to do it. One of those is the incumbent, Pratt & Whitney, who built the TF-33 engine that's on the B-52 now. I'm here with Chris Johnson at their booth to kind of explain to me their submission for the Air Force to re-engine the B-52. Chris, thanks for chatting with me and talk to me about this engine.
Sure, Jeff. Well, this is the PW800. We've been looking at it for a while. We're doing an integration study right now with the Air Force and with Boeing. And what we're seeing is that there's never been a better time to re-engine the B-52 than today.
Okay.
The Air Force has been looking at this kind of project for a while, which makes sense, it's hard. But we see there's never been a better time than there is today to re-engine the B-52.
Great.
So the engine itself, PW800, is going to give a low cost across the whole life cycle. It's a perfect engine for it. Integration is a hard job. This engine's going to make it easy.
How so?
Nope. So for integration, B-52, we need to open up the aircraft, integrate into systems. We'll be making some updates there. But if you're using existing engines, you've got to take what's out there. And what we're seeing is the PW800 is perfectly sized to fly the mission as needed, and on top of that, it's lightweight. So it's going to give back 5,500 pounds per aircraft.
That's not small.
No.
Is that per engine or total across?
That's across the aircraft. So whether that's needed on the airframe as this effort's going on, or if the Air Force is thinking about growth potential, maybe more PTMS systems, it's a capability. I think it's the right side of the equation you want to be on.
Talk to me about production. So you've got over 70 of these in service, 8 engines per bomber. That's a lot of engines you got to build. Where are you guys going to do that, and what's the scale to get there?
The PW800 has been part of really a revolution in commercial aerospace. So regional jets, business jets, the customers are buying this and are going to be using this for decades.
Okay.
So with this re-engining, you've got a supply chain that's going to be there.
Chris, thanks for the information. I really do appreciate it. Next, let's go look at 2 of the other companies that are looking to put engines on the B-52. So over here at Rolls-Royce, they've got another competitor here for the B-52 engine, the F-130. So I'm here with Craig McVeigh with Rolls-Royce to kind of explain to me what this engine can do for the B-52.
Sure. Well, the outset of this is a result of the cost prohibitive nature of sustaining the TF-33, which is currently on the B-52 today. The idea, of course, is to go out with a commercial off-the-shelf solution, one that's new, one that's in production, but we happen to have an engine that is what we would characterize as a perfect fit. The F-130 is flying with the Air Force today. It's on the E-11 Bacon aircraft. It's on the C-37A executive platform. And so they're familiar with the engine. The nature of the engine, very efficient, very maintainable, incredible reliability, and so all of those attributes we found to include the thrust class and the size of the engine, what we would characterize as a perfect fit. By way of example, the diameter of the engine is 50 inches, so is the TF-33. The thrust class is 17,000 pounds sea level static, so is the TF-33. So why is that important? Well, first of all, it meets the criteria of a commercial off-the-shelf solution, and second of all, if you can mimic the TF-33 as much as possible, what's important is that you don't take your eye off the fact that the B-52 is a 50-plus-year-old airplane. And so putting a new engine with increased thrust or certain capabilities could actually be a negative impact on the platform as far as some of the stresses and the wear and tear that you would have on an airplane. This is exactly what they would be looking for. Highly reliable, over 25 million hours in the fleet of F-130s that are out there right now, in production and ready to go.
So with this engine, was that just kind of a lucky coincidence that the F-130 was the perfect dimension, or was that a design modification?
You got to be at the right place at the right time. There is absolutely no modification.
Talk to me about production. So you've got 8 engines per aircraft, and a lot of these aircraft, that's a lot of engines that got to get built. Where would you build them? How would you scale up?
We have just spent well over $600 million improving our Indianapolis facility. We're well facilitized, the capability and capacity to meet the demands of the Air Force once we win this contract.
Craig, thanks for showing me this. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So another competitor to re-engine the B-52 actually has 2 engines they want to put forward. So we're here at GE with Sean Warren to kind of talk to me about what this first engine is. So what am I looking at, and what can it do for the B-52?
Oh, so right. So as you said, we do have 2 engines available for the B-52 re-engining campaign, which nobody else can say. First engine here that we're looking at is the Passport engine. So it's our latest and greatest engine in this thrust class. Just went into service in 2018.
What's it on right now?
It currently flies on the Global 7500, which is out flying the world, breaking all kinds of records, longest flight records, so best fuel burn in the industry there.
So having the Passport already in service, already being built, means you don't have to build a production line or anything like that.
That's
You're
right.
ready
We've
to go.
got an active production line going today, right? So it's just a question of how many they want and when they want it.
So as you said, the Passport isn't your only option you're going to have a look at. So let's go take a look at what else you guys got.
Sure, perfect. All right, and so as we discussed, we have 2 engines to offer in the competition. This is our second engine, the CF34-10.
What's different from this in the Passport?
So the Passport is a business jet engine. It flies on a Global 7500. CF34-10 is actually a regional jet engine.
With these 2 engines that you guys have, I mean, do you plan to bid both for the Air Force? That's kind of a double whammy coming in for you.
Yeah, so the beauty is we actually have the option of bidding 2, right? You start with the thrust class. These are both 18K thrust engines. So it really comes down to what the Air Force is looking for in the draft RFP. And as long as both products are competitive, we absolutely plan on bidding both, and then let the best engine win.
So one big thing I hear from the Air Force a lot is they want engines that are easier to maintain. Even when the TF-33 was new, it wasn't exactly easy to maintain. So they want things that are easier to go in and work on. What do your engines do for that?
Yeah, so the beauty of the products there, and I would say you can probably get this with any modern engine, is none of the engines are actually going to have any scheduled engine removals in the life of the program.
That's huge.
Right, so that takes away a huge amount of the burden that comes from maintainability and maintenance, right?
Sean, thanks for the information here. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to read more about the entire B-52 re-engine process, both from the Air Force's perspective and from industry, be sure to visit defensenews.com. Thanks for watching. To keep up to date with all of our coverage, be sure to visit our Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn pages. Also, be sure to add us on Apple's News app and other platforms for the latest updates. And when we come back, we're going to sit down with General David Goldfein to talk about his priorities for his final year as Chief of Staff. 2020 will be General David Goldfein's last year being the Air Force Chief of Staff. So here at the show, Air Warfare reporter Valerie Encena talked with him about his priorities for that time and what he's already done as Chief.
Sir, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, always.
So as you were walking over here, we just got the news that Ambassador Barbara Barrett has just been moved forward by the Senate Armed Services Committee. So now full Senate will have a vote on her nomination to be Air Force Secretary.
Great.
Do you have any reaction to that?
Yeah, all positive. I mean, I think, pending the confirmation by the full Senate, and I'll tell you, as I mentioned yesterday in the speech, we won the lottery again. Think about her background. It couldn't be more perfect, right? So you have someone who's been an industry leader, instrument-rated pilot, trained astronaut, right, who was ready to go up on a Russian mission, a former deputy director of the FAA, former chair of our aerospace corporation, and an ambassador. And I have gotten a chance to get to know her, over the last several weeks. And I'll also offer just a deeply good person that I'm really looking forward to working with and working for.
Great.
So all positive, and I couldn't be more excited.
Well, I mean, we're at AFA here now. This is your last AFA conference before you retire probably next year. So in your last year as chief, what are your major goals and how are you going to accomplish those?
Yeah, so right now, I describe where I'm focused is, 2 words: violent execution. Right? How do we take the things that we started, which are big efforts that take full 4 years of focus? How do we drive those to the point where they're part of the fabric of the institution? And so they're not only irreversible, but they maintain sort of campaign momentum, right? And they're all focused together on joint warfighting excellence. So I want to continue to drive forward on, resetting that fundamental fighting formation of the Air Force, the squadron. I want to make sure that we really work through the overhaul of the officer promotion system, continue to work through the same thing we did on the enlisted side, and strengthen the way we develop joint leaders of the future. And then everything that you saw relative to multi-domain operations. How do I, in a year, work with the chairman and my fellow Joint Chiefs to drive this into doctrine, drive this into all the joint library of how we operate to the point where it's all irreversible. So I'm actually not bringing on anything significantly new. I'm just into violent execution. And what I'm most excited about perhaps is the team that we have in place right now between MAGCOM commanders, vice chief, director of staff, and the staff is as good as I've ever seen. And so we're really postured well to accelerate.
And one last question on readiness. it seems like the Air Force is moving away from the MC-80 mandate that Secretary Mattis put out, a couple years ago or a year ago. So what is the new goal?
So we're not actually moving away from it because we haven't been relieved from that responsibility by Secretary Esper. I can tell you the entire department or all the services have all come forward to say, can we make sure that what we're measuring and what the Secretary of Defense is demanding from us is an adequate measure of readiness on what really counts, which at the end of the day is performance. What we're graded on is whether when a combatant commander says, I need a squadron of B-52s, can we get it to halfway around the world in 48 hours and then have it up and operating 24 hours later, which we recently did. That's at the end of the day what the final measure of readiness is, which is performance against combatant commander demand signal. So within that construct, everybody builds readiness and sustains it a little bit different. I can't speak specifically for naval readiness or for land-based readiness, but I can tell you for the air component, what you have to do if you're going to build and sustain readiness is, first of all, you have to have trained and ready people, and that's more than the pilot. That's the pilot, the maintainer, the air traffic controller, the fueler, the avionics specialist. It's everybody who has their fingerprints right on that airplane. And then once you have an airplane, right, when that airplane's rolling down the runway, it's burning fuel, it's rubber on the tires, right? So you have to have a flying hour program that allows you to fly a certain rate for that aircraft. Once it gets airborne, it has to have some place to go to train. So you have to have investment in ranges and threat emitters so it can train to a high end, right? And then the airplane lands, it has to go into maintenance, phase maintenance, depot maintenance, right? Modification. And then the final thing you have to have is time, right, to build readiness. And so you take a look at all of those measures and there's investment required in each. The MC rate, the mission capable rate, is only one of those measures that's required, right? So, how are we doing? Well, if you take a look at people, right, we were 4,000 short. We've taken that down to 0 in terms of maintainers. That's really significant. Pilots, we were training about 1,100 a year. Now we're approaching 1,500 a year. So we're really attacking the people side. When we started this in terms of flying hour program, we were doing about 16 hours a month. Now we're up to 20 and about to hit 21 hours per month. We're back flying about the way I did when I was a young pilot. So we're back in the air. 3.6 billion, we'll get the number to make sure I got that exactly right, but about that amount of money that we put into ranges and emitters and high-end training to be able to replicate a high-end threat. And the things that we're doing in the depot with 3D printing, with conditions-based maintenance, and then we have really aggressively gone after time. Exercises, what are we doing to make sure that we give more time for folks to train? So I know it's a long answer, but say that we're not backing off of MC-80. We're just, I think, acknowledging that it's one measure of readiness, but you have to actually invest in far more than that. You have to invest in all of those categories.
Great, thank you so much for joining us.
And coming up, we'll look at some modifications coming to the B-2 stealth bomber. On this week's Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personnel finance expert Brian Parker offers his latest tips.
A credit card is one of the best financial tools you can have in your wallet. Think of it like your standard issued multi-tool. Now, instead of pliers and screwdrivers, some cards are equipped with perks like rewards or cash back. Depending on the card, there's likely more perks that can protect you along the way. Most credit cards offer some sort of zero liability protection. This safeguards cardholders against unauthorized charges made on their cards. So no matter how or where you use your card, you can always feel confident with every swipe. Certain credit cards also offer the benefit of protecting your purchases in the form of guaranteed returns, ticket protection, and even extended warranties, some of which provide security beyond the manufacturer's guarantee. Some cards may even offer cell phone protection against damage and theft. Now check with your card issuer to see what unique perks you can get. So do your research and see what benefits your card offers. Now, a multi-tool has a wealth of potential, and so does your credit card. Make sure you make the most of it.
Thanks, Brian. We'll see you next time. To get more Defense News coverage, be sure to visit our website at defensenews.com and subscribe to our Early Bird Brief, delivered to your inbox every weekday morning to get you ready to start the day. And when we come back, we're going to go talk to Northrop Grumman and hear about some modifications coming to the B-2 stealth bomber. The B-2 stealth bomber has always been at the cutting edge of technology. And while many have had their eyes on the B-21 Raider, Northrop Grumman is working to keep the B-2 as state-of-the-art as possible. So I talked with their program manager to get the details. So right when you walk in here at the exhibit floor, one of the first things you're going to see is the B-2 bomber here at Northrop Grumman's booth here on the exhibit floor. But in order to learn a little bit more about what's next for this bomber, here with Richard Sullivan from Northrop Grumman to kind of talk us through. So first of all, Rick, thanks for joining me.
Yeah,
and what's next for the B-2? What modifications are you guys working on?
So we have 3 major things going on right now, and what we've done is we separated them into blocks. So the first block is block 6.2, and that's at operational test right now. And that's adding the flexible strike capability to the weapon system, which is a phenomenal upgrade that enables effectively mixed loads on the 2 bomb bays of this weapon system, something that is unparalleled for what this was the bomber of the past. The second one's called block 6.4, which is adding, and it's still using the legacy avionics system, which is adding the updated GPS systems, additional weapons, and additional combat capability to the aircraft. And probably the third and most important is the defensive management system modification. That we call that the third block, or block 7. That is a significant avionics upgrade to the weapon system, adding open mission systems architecture, adding a new avionics suite, adding new displays, and improving the low observability antenna system that's on the aircraft. So when you look at what's happening with us right now and what the bomber is getting right now, it is a significant game-changing upgrade to the entire weapon system.
So the B-2 has never exactly not been technologically advanced. That was kind of the key for it when it came through, but it's safe to say this kind of brings the bomber into the 21st century?
I would say that if you look at the photos over the course of time, you'll see small changes over the course of time, and all those changes were very technologically driven. From an avionics system upgrade, yes, the one we're doing right now with DMSM is the most advanced system that we're doing all at once. But over the course of time, we're 30 years since first flight. Over the course of that time, we've not only been sustaining the aircraft, I'll say quietly making significant upgrades over that entire 30-year time frame.
And so with this aircraft, what's the status? How many aircraft in the fleet have kind of received this? What's kind of the status of you rolling that out?
So each one of the blocks is in a different time phase. So for the first one with block 6.2, that's out at Whiteman Air Force Base. There's 2 jets that have that. 6.4 is rolling through the design and development phase right now. And for DMS modernization, we have 1 aircraft that's modified right now at Palmdale.
Great, so you guys are making, it's working its way through, and hopefully will roll out faster as we do it more.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you, probably the most important thing is the partnership that we have with our Air Force customer and DCMA. Together, combined with the Air Force, we're able to make changes to this aircraft. And I know that you have it for your job here is understanding what the aircraft availability of this aircraft weapon system is. It's the best ever. You look at the MC rate of this aircraft, over 62% of where we are right now. Last year, I think in the article, it was 60.7% mission capable rate. And that is just what we've been doing. If I challenge anybody to look in the past to see what that line looks like, it's a beautiful slope, both for aircraft availability and MC rate. We're making a difference. The combined B-2 enterprise is making a difference on making this a phenomenal bomber.
And shifting, how is that? I mean, you guys are, and once an aircraft goes in with you guys, it's there for a year. It's there for a good amount of time. What do you do during that time frame?
So you say it's there for a year. We brought it down to a year. Okay. So there's a whole bunch of things that are part of that 365-day. We called it the drive to 365. The 365 time frame is we have 2 jets in PDM. It's our program depot maintenance. And the primary purpose for PDM is to refurbish the LO system. So we take all of the paint and everything off of the aircraft. We refurbish the LO system, or the outside of the aircraft. At the same time, we do a lot of the modifications that I've been talking about in line with this PDM process. So over the course of the year, the aircraft that come into PDM and the aircraft that come out of PDM, the ones that are coming out is significantly better in all performance parameters. It's a better LO aircraft because we're using the new materials and the new technologies to apply them. The avionics changes are happening in line with that 365-day cycle. And the other thing we've done in this 365-day change is reduce the number of aircraft that we're doing simultaneously from 3 to 2. Since every aircraft is worth 5%, right? It's a 20 aircraft fleet. By giving one aircraft back to the wing, we've increased the aircraft availability just with that.
And that also allows you to conversely focus more effort on the 2 aircraft you have in service versus spreading the workload out over 3, right?
Yeah, and it's not so much a workload thing. You kind of make adjustments to the workload, but it's an optimal balance of aircraft availability, modifications, and combat capability. So what we try to do is minimize our footprint for taking aircraft out of the fleet, combat-coded aircraft out of the fleet. And that's really been our focus. Our strategic focus is availability, reducing cost, and adding discriminating capability.
All right, Richard, thanks for the time. I really do appreciate it here at the show. Thank you.
No, thank you very much,
you.
sir.
That's all we've got time for this week here from National Harbor, but if you want to see and read more of our coverage here at AFA, be sure to head over to defensenews.com and visit our digital show daily. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.